In the beautiful city of Lagos, there lived three best friends called Jude, Henry, and Paul. They came from the same village and they served the same master in the city of Lagos. However, 5 years after they were settled by their master to set up their own businesses, it was too difficult to become successful. Each time they traveled back to the village, during the festive seasons to meet their families, they always feel ashamed and embarrassed, because most of their mates return to the village with new luxurious cars and designer clothes. Jude, Henry, and Paul would always buy only a big loaf of bread for their parents. This made them very ashamed and often made them feel reluctant to travel to the village during the festive season. Even though their parents understood their predicaments, they were still sad. Their parents always advised them not to be hard on themselves, that they should be patient. But they know their parents are not comfortable with the way they are. After many years, when they have returned to the city and refused to travel home, they decided that this coming December, they must reach home. As December approached once again, the three friends decided to meet at a club where they used to meet. Jude and Paul reached there first. Some minutes later, Henry arrived in a very luxurious car. When Jude and Paul saw Henry coming down from the car, they were very shocked because they didn't have enough money to buy a motorcycle. So they were surprised that how and where did Henry got the money to buy expensive car. Immediately Henry came down, he joined them at the table where they sat. He asked them to make orders, that he will pay for whatever they would drink and eat that evening. This also surprised Jude and Paul the more, because they knew that Henry was also struggling like the rest of them. Out of curiosity, Jude asked, "Henry, who owns the car you came in?" "My guy." Henry laughed at his question and answered, "It belongs to me. I own it. I bought it. God has finally answered my prayers. This Christmas would be very different for us," he said, all smiling. "The last time I checked, we are all trying to make ends meet. How are you able to afford such a luxurious car in less than 1 year?" Paul asked. "It was like a miracle. I sincerely can't explain how it happened, but it can only be God. I got a contract to supply over 1,000 units of television and refrigerator for a new hotel. That's why I say this is a miracle," Henry replied. Jude and Paul rejoiced with him, and together they all celebrated Henry's success. They all ate and drank to their full, and Henry paid the bill just as he had promised. However, Jude didn't believe what Henry said. He found it very difficult and impossible to accept that Henry got a massive contract just like that, without having to suffer for it. The next day, Jude went to see Paul at his shop in the market. Paul was attending to a few customers when Jude came. So, he sat and waited for Paul to finish what he was doing. As he sat and waited, a lot of things was running through his mind. He saw many shops in the vicinity filled with so many customers who queued up to buy items, while some shops were dry as desserts, with their owners dozing off. As they waited, Paul attended to all his customers and then came to him. "Jude, my very good friend, this would be the first time you would visit me during business hours. Hope all is well," Paul asked. Jude took a deep breath and drew closer to Paul, and he started talking to him in a very low and soft voice. He firstly looked around to make sure that no one else could hear what they were discussing. "What do you think about Henry?" Jude asked. "Well, he's a very lucky man to have landed such contract. I'm sure that his life would never remain the same. He's now one of the big boys in time," Paul replied. "Do you seriously believe that Henry won a contract so easily?" Jude asked again, this time looking so serious. "Contract that people compete for and even kill each other. You think Henry got it so easily like he claimed? What do you mean? Do you think Henry is lying to us about the source of the money?" Paul asked in confusion. Jude looked left and right to be sure that no one was close by. Then he said, "I'm very confident that Henry is involved in something illegal or spiritual to get the money. Even if it was truly contract, he has done some sacrifice. Christmas is in 2 weeks and Henry will be traveling to the village with his new car. While both of us would obviously join him in his new car and buy ordinary bread for our families. Whereas, Henry would buy a lot of provisions for his family. What you think our parents will think when they see Henry with a new car? Jude asked. It will look like we are the cursed ones. He replied himself. I guess you are right. But what can we do? Do you have any suggestions? Because I don't really like the way business is going. Paul said. Well, I think I know of a way. I have heard about a powerful witch doctor called Santo, who has the powers to make anyone rich and wealthy. I'm very sure that Henry visited the witch doctor. Because once certain time, both of us had such discussions as well. Which doctor? Paul asked. If that's the only way, I can't, he added. Paul came from a Christian home and he was also a devout Christian who didn't joke with the things of God. But this situation was enough to pressure anyone to do whatever it takes to get rich. Why are you scared now? You think you will spill human blood? No, don't even think about that. The witch doctor will tell us what to do, and I'm sure there is no spilling of human blood. Jude said. Are you sure about this? The devil is tricky, you know. His gifts always comes with conditions. Paul said. What is your problem? What is the most difficult thing he can ask for? You know what, just follow me to see Baba and listen to what he has to say. If he say anything that doesn't sit well with you, then you would leave his place and never return. I promise. Are you not even tired of the way you are living? Is this the kind of life you promised yourself? Jude asked. Paul thought about all that Jude said and thought about the shame he faced whenever they travel to the village. Although his parents acts comfortable. But deep down in their hearts, they wished he was as wealthy and successful as the other men who returned every year to the village. After thinking for a while, Paul accepted to follow Jude to Niger State where Baba Samto resides. The following weekend, Jude and Paul embarked on a journey to Niger State to see the famous witch doctor. When they arrived at the village where they were told that Baba resides at 7:30 p.m. When they entered the village, it was very dark already and the village was very different from all other villages they passed through to find the man. It was an ancient village with old huts scattered around. And only elderly men and women were living in them. Jude and Paul found it hard to understand why it was only elderly people who were in the village and there were no children. They continued walking down the village, following the direction of the man who told them about Baba Samto. They were almost giving up when they saw a very big and beautiful duplex at the edge of the village covered with bushes and hidden. The two men walked with fear in their hearts to the entrance of the duplex. They were shocked that such a magnificent building could be found in such a remote village. They enter the gate of the duplex and three beautiful women were cooking at the corner of the house. The women look at the men and smile, then they continued their cooking. Jude and Paul didn't understand why they smiled. They continued to the door of the duplex which opened by itself when they got closer. They stood, looking shocked. Come inside. A voice spoke. Paul was very scared. He held Jude by the hand and together, they entered the duplex where they met an old man seated on one of the luxurious sofa, which was in the living room. The old man pointed to two of them to sit down and then he asked them. What can I do for you? Paul was already trembling in fear where he sat. The walls of the living room were decorated with fresh human heads, and the walls, which used to be white, were stained and painted with pure human blood. Jude cleared his truth and began. The truth is that are looking for Baba Samto. We were told that he has the power to grant us any wish and change our lives. The old man laughed hard at Jude's statement. Yes, it is true that I have the power to grant any wish and change your lives. But nothing goes for nothing. You must be willing to exchange something to get what you need. I am Baba Samto, the man that you seek. My friend and I are tired of poverty. We are tired of the shame and suffering that comes with it. We want wealth. We want to be rich like our peers, please help us," Jude said. Baba Somto looked at the two men, with a smile on his face. But his eyes were more focused on Paul, who was visibly trembling. He looked at Paul closely and his eyes rested on his small rosary hanging on his neck. Paul was too focused on the blood on the walls to notice Baba, who was looking at him. "I can make you rich, beyond your widest dreams," the prominent popular men you know, came to me for their powers, Baba said and laughed. "But like I said, there is a price to be paid." Paul looked at Jude immediately. He heard Baba say that there is a price to be paid. And he whispered to him, "I am not ready to kill anyone because of wealth," before he could finish his statement. "Yes, I said there is a price to be paid, but it does not mean you have to kill anyone. All you need is a white cock and a bottle of pure alcohol and cola nuts. If you are able to get all these, I would make you rich beyond your widest dreams." Jude and Paul looked at him in surprise. They found it's very strange that this is what it only took to get rich. Something so simple to afford. "Are you sure that is all we need?" Jude asked. "Yes, that is all you need. If you don't have the money for it, I can provide you with all that you need for the rituals. I'm placing this position to help the less fortunate." Jude was very happy at Baba's proposal. Paul was even more happy because it required no bloodshed. They quickly agreed to his proposal. And together, they went into a dark red room inside the duplex. Baba illuminated the room, and on one side of the room was an altar with many calf gods. Jude and Paul were asked to remove their clothes and change into a white garment which they tied around their waist. Baba gave each of them a white cock, a bottle of alcohol and a piece of cola nut to chew. He told them to follow him. While he led the way, he took them to a river bank, where they knelt down and Baba rounded the white cock around their head, killed them, and poured the blood on their head while he made some incantations. The cock blood flowed from their head down to their body, staining the white garment which they wore. He then took them to the back of the shrine. When they arrived, he asked them to pour the bottle of alcohol on the carved gods, which were arranged inside the strange room. After they were done, he took them into another room which contained almost a dozen coffins. He opened 2 of the coffins and told them, "You would have to sleep here for 3 days. Don't worry about what you would eat or drink. 3 days in the land of the spirit is like 3 hours. When you arise on the 3rd day, you become wealthy than you can ever imagine." Paul begins to be scared. He wants to turn around and go home. But it was already too late to go back. "Let's just do this and get over with it. It's just 3 days. You can't come this far for nothing," Jude said. Paul listened and accepted to enter the coffin for 3 days. Together they slowly entered the coffin with their blood-stained garment and laid inside with their face up. Baba asked them to close their eyes. He blew a white powder on them and they fell into a very deep sleep before he closed the coffin and left the room. 3 days later, Baba entered the room once again and opened the coffins. He blew the white substance on them again and they woke up instantly. Then he took them back into the living room. "Congratulations, you are now billionaires. You'll be rich beyond your widest dreams. However, you need to come and see me to renew your rituals every 6 months." Jude and Paul looked at each other and smiled. When they came out of the house, they saw the 3 beautiful women once again still cooking, while one of them was pounding something inside a very big motor. But there was a party being held at the duplex. This involved a lot of popular personalities all seated inside the compound eating, drinking, and dancing to music. Jude and Paul were very hungry. So they decided to approach one of the women to give them some food before they journeyed back to the city of Lagos. When they got to where the women are cooking, they looked inside the pots and they were shocked to their bones. The pot was filled with sweet-smelling pepper soup, but the meat inside the pot was human meat. They saw human hands, legs, ears, hand and intestines, while one of the women who was pounding was actually pounding a newborn baby in the mortar with blood splattered all over. Paul was extremely shocked. He was so scared that she screamed the name of Jesus. All the women and the men in the compound turned and looked at him. "Don't ever call that name here." One of the women shouted at him and took the rosary, which was on his neck. "You have sold your soul to the devil for riches. You are now his servants." Another woman told him. Jude and Paul left the compound feeling shocked. As they walked back through the village they came from, they were surprised to see that everything was different. The village they had previously passed was not empty, but now it was totally empty. And there was no one in the huts as they walked past, until they got the road where they took a bus back home. Both of them were too shocked to say anything to each other until they got to their various houses. The next day when Jude woke up, he saw a message on his phone. It was a credit alert of 100 million naira, to supply a company with lots of his merchandise. Jude quickly jumped out of the bed and went to the market to supply the merchandise. The joy of the money made him forget all that he went through at Baba residence. Paul wasn't different. He also got a call to sell his merchandise worth millions. Jude and Paul became millionaires overnight. They both bought very expensive luxury cars, which were far beautiful than Henry's car. The next time the three friends met at the club, Henry was surprised when he saw Jude and Paul. Everything about them showed that they were now very wealthy. Henry asked them how they became very successful. They told him about the contracts that were coming in, but they didn't tell him about their visit to Baba Place. Henry was very happy for them and thanked God for remembering them too. When it was Christmas, they all traveled to the village with their different cars. As soon as they arrived at the village, they began to spray money lavishly. Bundles of new mint notes. Jude and Paul bought a lot of gifts and provisions, which they gave to their families and the villagers. They spent so much money to the extent that they were given a chief title before they left. Their parents were very happy for them. And each time they ask them how they became very wealthy, Jude and Paul will tell them the same story. However, Henry was reserved in his expenditures. He spent his money wisely and would hardly indulge himself in any reckless spending, unlike Jude and Paul who were spending money lavishly and without control. Jude and Paul were the talk of the town and the whole village before they left back to the city of Lagos. When the friends returned back to the city, Jude and Paul became well known. They bought many houses and properties. They often traveled abroad to have fun and relax. They employed people to manage their businesses as they were getting contracts almost every week. Life was very sweet for them. 6 months later, Jude was sleeping when he had a very scary dream in which he found himself with his mother and only sister inside a boat, in a very big ocean. They were all laughing and talking until a great storm came, and the ocean started to rock the boat violently. His mother and sister fell into the ocean, and they couldn't swim. But Jude could only save one person. And he became very confused, because he didn't know who to choose. As he was still thinking of who to save, they both drowned in the ocean and he woke up breathing very hard, and his heart beating very fast. He couldn't sleep again. And so he stayed up until it was morning. Paul also had a similar dream in which he found himself, his mother and his only brother inside a helicopter, which was about to crash. There were only 2 parachutes. And he had to choose one person, between his mother and only brother. As he was trying to make a decision, the helicopter crashed, and they all died before he woke up. He woke up with sweats all over his body. In the morning, the 2 friends met each other, narrated the dreams they both had to each other, and it then occurred to them that it has been 6 months since they did the rituals and Baba had instructed them to meet him every 6 months to renew the rituals. They got prepared and set out on the journey to Niger State once again to meet Baba. They thought about the scary things they witnessed the last time and they were even more afraid. On their way, they bought a white cock, a bottle of alcohol and kola nuts for each of them that they would use for the rituals, just as they did the first time. When you go to Baba residence, they saw the 3 women outside the house again. They were still cooking. Fear gripped both of them because they knew what was in the pot. They went into the duplex and saw Baba seated in the living room. As usual, they greeted him and get the items they had bought as they sat down. "We have come as you requested, to renew our rituals and to also thank you for what you did for us." "Thank you so much, Baba." "Jesus would," as Paul mentioned the name of Jesus, Baba screamed. "Don't ever call that name here again. I can see that you brought the items I requested, but there is a little problem." Jude and Paul became confused at Baba's words. They asked what the problem was. "The gods do not require a white cock and the items you bought. They told me that they have shown you what they need in your dreams and you have to make a decision or lose the both of them." Jude and Paul became very confused. They didn't understand what Baba meant. Until when they remember the dream they both had. It became very clear to them. You have to choose who you would sacrifice to renew the rituals or else you would lose the both of them and everything you've gotten from the gods. The two friends looked at each other in shock. They couldn't believe their ears. "But you said we wouldn't kill anyone. You promised us that all we needed was a white cock and some minor items." Jude said angrily. "I am simply a mouthpiece of the gods. I do not make decisions for them. You have 3 days to make your decision or face the consequences." Baba gave each of them a native pot with a red cloth tied to it and instructed them to put the picture of the person they wanted to sacrifice into the native pot in less than 3 days. "Make sure nothing happens to these pots. If it should break, then your life will be over." Jude Paul returned to the city of Lagos with pain and regret in their hearts. They couldn't imagine losing any of their family members because the aim of getting rich was to give their families a comfortable life. What is the essence of the wealth, if they would have to kill their family members, who we are supposed to enjoy the wealth with them? But it was too late. They had to make a decision or risk losing everything. After thinking for hours, Jude suggested that they should meet Henry and ask where he got his own wealth from. Paul agreed with this idea and together, they went to meet Henry at home. They narrated all that happened to him and they pleaded with him to share with them the name of the witch doctor that helped him. Henry was very surprised at their words and also disappointed in them. "I didn't meet any witch doctor for my wealth. I've been saving for months for the car that I bought. It didn't just happen overnight. And the contract I got. It wasn't easy either. I've been chasing that contract for many years before God helped me. I am a sure Christian who loves God and I would never meet the devil for any reason, no matter how desperate I may be." Jude and Paul felt helpless. Paul felt betrayed for listening to Jude when he suggested that they should meet Baba Santo, but it was too late for him already to revert his decision. "I would advise you guys to go back to God and beg for his forgiveness. At this point, I think he's the only one that can save you." The two friends left Henry's house in regret. They decided to drive to the nearest church to seek assistance. On their way, they had a very terrible accident and the both of them lost their lives. Their bodies were burned beyond recognition. All that they had was destroyed mysteriously and their families gained nothing from their existence. The lesson of this story reminds us that it is not always right to assume that our friends made wealth through illegal means, in order to use it to encourage ourselves to pursue wealth in illegal ways. True success comes from hard work and integrity, not short. Because it lead to regret.